Hi, I'm Giovanna Scaletta-Bremke, and I am the acting president of the Lorain County Bar Association. We are here for our first annual, or first virtual candidates night. Tonight you will be hearing from the Avon Lake Municipal Court judicial candidates. First will be candidate attorney Jeff Smith. Next will be Wayne Nickel, and third will be Allison Manning. Lastly, we'll have Magistrate Paul Coaches. I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Judge Thomas Januzzi.
Good afternoon, Attorney Smith.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Attorney Smith, why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
All right, I'd be happy to do that. Before we get started on that, though, I just want to thank Jeannie and the Bar Association and Logan here for videotaping us today, and yourself for taking the time out of your schedule to be here. Well, basically, in terms of me, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for 40 years now. I've practiced 20 years here at Smith & Smith in Avon Lake, and I've been 20 years on my own. In addition to doing that, I've practiced in all the municipal courts, including yours. The municipal courts are vary in terms of what services they provide, what they do for the people that are there. I've gone, I know for sure, as far east as Youngstown and as far west as Bowling Green, Toledo. And it just gives me a well-rounded view of the municipal courts. I also was law director here in the city of Avon Lake, where we are here in the basement of the public library, a great facility. I've been here before when I was law director, and I've been here many times in the studios that are here. So I've been a resident of Avon Lake basically my whole life. I was raised here. I raised my children here. It's a great place to live. I've been a member of the parishes here. The court jurisdiction, of course, is Avon Lake, and Sheffield Village, and spent time in all of those places.
Why are you running for the position as municipal judge at the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
Your Honor, this is something that has been something I've wanted to do for a long time. I did run for Common Pleas Court back in the early 2000s. This particular court opened up at that time. I chose not to run for it. One of those things where you look back and you say, you know, maybe I should have done that. But all in all, the fact of the matter is, the real reason that I'm going to do it is because I know I'm going to do a good job at it. And I will be able to help Avon Lake, Avon, and Sheffield Village. You have people here that, one, want to know your judge, two, that need to be protected. And there's various ways as a municipal judge, which is where you first meet the people in most cases that are going to be going through the judicial system. As you're aware, I think, it's a spot where you can really help people, and that's what I want to do. And if people don't want the help, well, then that's a whole different story, as you're well aware.
And what involvement have you had in the communities served by the court?
Well, as I said earlier, I was a law director in Avon Lake for 14 years. As law director, I supervised the prosecutor and prosecuted cases. In fact, my prosecutor that I hired at the time was John Rulbach, and in 1995 I hired him. He is still there to this day, which shows that I made a very good selection. I have somebody that the police trust when I hired him, and he's still there. I've also been involved, like I said, in the churches. I was a longtime member of St. Joe's. I'm a member of St. Thomas and Sheffield Lake. I have been involved in the baseball, the CYO programs. I coached. I think I might have coached against you once or twice back in the early 2000s. And I just been a member. I was a member of the Charter Review Commission in Avon Lake as well. So I think when it comes to these things, I've been very active in all the things, as well as being in the Avon Lake Democratic Clubs for 20 years.
What particular personal characteristics do you have that make you well suited for the role as judge?
Well suited, and we're not talking about the clothes you wear, but I think what you're talking about is a temperament. temperament is so important because, like I said, when you have someone come in front of you and they're there in this court for the first time, maybe they did something very bad, maybe they didn't do something bad, maybe they're there on a small claims case, maybe they're there on a civil matter that's been filed or an eviction. It's important that you have somebody that can listen. And as an attorney, it is the most important thing that someone listens to what you have to say. And if you don't listen, what are you going to do? You have to listen, and then you have to have the knowledge and the experience, which I have, to know what the answers are and how are we going to get from point A to point B.
Now, in this position, single judge municipal court, and you appoint the clerk in this court, you will be overseeing an entire court staff in the operation of the court. What experience do you have that will make you the best candidate to run the court, the overall court well?
There are a couple things for sure. One is I was the managing partner at Smith & Smith in Avon Lake, and there was 11 attorneys and approximately 12 staff that I managed and looked over back when I was there. I also have been in the Lorain Law Department and went into the Safety Service Department there where we overlooked and managed those folks. And I also managed, when I was law director here, the people, it was a lot smaller, of course, but you had the prosecutor and my secretaries, and you also had the clientele, which was the counsel. So I think when it comes to being able to manage those, and then in my private practice, still I have the folks that I see there. And in my private practice, I also have companies that I do work for. They always have employee issues and things, and I've done all that in the past. So I think when it comes to that particular question, I'm very well suited to be able to manage the clerk and the staff and the bailiffs.
Please discuss the process that you would use to facilitate possible resolution of criminal cases with the prosecutor and defense attorneys. And with regard to this, will you be discussing potential resolution in chambers, or will the discussions be in open court or some other method? And would resolution of cases take place in open court always, sometimes, or not at all?
Well, there are a lot of questions in that one, so I don't know, Jeannie, if I'll be able to get this one done in the time frame, but as a judge, it's important that you are able to know all the factors, what's going on with a particular case. And there are civil cases in this court too, besides just the criminal cases. So there are resolutions that occur while you're on the bench. There are resolutions that occur in discussions and in pretrial matters, pretrials between the lawyers and the prosecutors. And I think it's important that when we have discussions that you have both sides in front of you at any time that you're going to discuss any kind of resolution. So when it comes to those matters, I can't give you a specific answer because I think each case will be dealt with on its own. So it will vary. And of course you have the motions that occur, the suppression motions and the trials that will occur, and obviously those all happen in the open court. So I think it's the answer in a short term is it's going to be a variety of all the above.
What are your thoughts with regard to diversity of staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
Diversity is very important. And we know that inclusivity is an important term in today's world. I will do my utmost to try and make sure that we have a diverse staff, because you have a diverse clientele or a diverse group of people that will become before you on the bench. And in my practice, I think my practice is very diverse. It's tended to be on the blue-collar side of things, but, and the thing is, you have to be able to address and know what everybody's issues are in their life. Everybody has different issues in their lives. And that's the hard part, to try and figure that out. But again, we get back to that this is the court where people first come. And you need you need the attorneys to help you to understand what some particular clients might have in terms of issues. So diversity is very important.
Do you believe it is necessary for the staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court to complete diversity, equity, and inclusion training and/or cultural sensitivity training?
I would sure hope they've already done that.
Under what circumstances would you issue warrants for failure to appear for court hearings or failure to comply with probation orders? And in that regard, do you have any thoughts or ideas how to reduce the number of persons who fail to appear for court? And what leniency, if any, would you give for a person who fails to appear for court?
Well, that kind of gets into one of the things I absolutely wanted to talk about today, and that is that this court needs a probation department. I think there needs to be a probation officer there. I brought with me and I showed you the budget for the court. And the budget's going to need to be able to have in it a probation department. They have currently used the county, as far as I'm aware, and you need somebody who, when somebody doesn't do what they say, like in your court, can walk down to your office and say, hey, we need so-and-so in here. We know, and we know where he is, because that you have to have that continuity. There are going to be things, I've looked at the budget, there may be some grants that are available, but I think when it comes to probation department, this court needs one, and that's one of the first things that I'm going to want to do. And then you get into, when you do that, you're going to be able to become more diverse and all that. And I will make sure that they all have that training that you talked about earlier. Every court, every municipal court in this area that I know of has a probation department. Even Vermillion has a probation department. This court doesn't. And I think it's time that one gets there so that we can. And the other thing that will do is I think that helps protect the citizenry too. When you know someone's not on their alcohol monitor or they've violated on the interlock, that you know that much quicker because you have that staff right there to let you know, which will protect the people, which is what we want to do too.
This next question is a lengthy question,
Okay.
so be patient with it.
I'll do
until
my
the
listening
question-
like I suggested everybody does as a lawyer.
Thank you. It starts off with a question, ends with a question. Do you believe that that judges should be able to override the state legislature or local legislative authority if the judge or the prosecutor or attorneys disagree with the law? For example, the law provides that if a person is convicted of a second offense OVI in 10 years, that person must serve a mandatory 10 consecutive days jail. The only exception is when a court makes a finding on the record that there is insufficient space in the jail. In that case, a judge may permit a person to serve 5 days jail and 18 days house arrest. Some people believe this and other laws to be too harsh. Should a judge follow the letter of the law, even if the judge and or the attorneys disagree with the law?
Well, what happens here is we have a court of appeals that sets forth what our law is, and that's what needs to be followed. We may disagree with it, and that could become overruled at some point, but I think that when the law is when the law says here, this is what you got to do, that's what we have to do. But I also would say that not everybody should be doing minimums all the time either. That's a whole different can of worms. So.
On November 8th, 2022, the Ohio Constitution was changed to require judges to consider public safety and a person's criminal record when setting a bond. This is a three-part question, but I think when I give you the questions, you'll understand. How will this constitutional amendment affect the way that you make bond decisions? What procedures will you have in place to make sure you are considering public safety and a person's criminal record when setting the bond? And would you consider requiring GPS and or alcohol monitoring devices as a condition of bond in order to ensure public safety?
I think that I've probably already answered this question if you listen to what I had to say. But when it comes to bonds, there are a multitude of things we can do. And our goal is to make sure these people, one, show up for court, and two, that the public is safe. Whatever is needed and what the law allows me to do, that will be what happens.
The jurisdiction of the Avon Lake Municipal Court is adding more and more retail businesses. This leads to possibly more opportunities for theft to occur. Is there anything you could do as judge to help deter theft in the Avon Lake Municipal Court District?
Well, I think when it comes to theft, and this is a good question that somebody had put forth to us, because I think that's where when you're the municipal judge, when this person comes in front of you, you have to explore a little deeper. And it's the defense counsel's job to let us know what's going on and why is this person stealing. They could be stealing because they don't have any money. They could be stealing because they're hooked on opioids. And we have to figure those out. And, and with the amount of retail that's here, I think you will see that increase. And if this opioid crisis continues the way it's been going, I think you'll see more. But that's where I think as a judge, when you're first seeing this person, trying to find out what that is, will really help you with the answers to those questions and what you're going to do on the bench.
The pandemic changed the way in which courts operate, including permitting remote video and telephonic appearances for participants. What are your thoughts or ideas for incorporating the use of technology such as video appearances to conduct hearings?
Well, I was a kid when the Jetsons came on, so I remember that. And they basically put that forward. I would prefer for people to come to court. I think court's important. I think it's important to respect the court. If you have to use those type of technologies, they're there for us to use in the appropriate circumstances. And there are going to be times when that happens. And I think that, we have to take advantage of all the things that are available to us to try to do the best job we can, particularly as your municipal court judge.
How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law? And would you plan on attending any seminars or seek training, especially for areas that you may be unfamiliar with? And what courses, if any, are you planning to take with regard to this?
Well, certainly the Ohio Judicial College puts on courses for first-time judges, for people who to go to. So I would certainly attend all those. I also would plan on being able to, and I think that every municipal court judge that I've talked to would have no issue with, if I decided if I had an issue to call them and say, like yourself, Judge Januzzi, I'm having an issue with this. Have you had this experience before? And I know that the municipal court judges meet about every 3 or 4 months and talk. And I look forward to being a part of that group when I'm elected. And there is so much information out there that we can get, but you have to understand that I certainly don't know everything, nor would I ever try to say I know everything. So to rely on all these sources is very important.
If elected, would you consider seeking a judicial post at a higher level before your term is completed? And if elected, do you presently plan on seeking an additional term as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
Well, I have no intention of running for any other position should I be elected to this judge. This is something that I know I'm going to do a great job at. I'm looking forward to coming here and going there every day and working and doing the best I can to help those that need help. And if they don't need help, to not help the ones that don't need help. And, that's where you talk about this firm but fair stuff that comes into play. We have citizenry in Avon and Sheffield Village and Avon Lake that need to be protected. I plan on doing that for 6 years as the municipal court judge. And as for re-election, I won't be able to do that because I'll be aged out. So I'm looking at 1 term and doing the absolute best I can for that term.
What experience do you have as either a mediator, arbitrator, magistrate, or similar position?
As a lawyer, we put all those hats on at any time. We have a client that comes in. They come in to see us because this is something very important. And when a client comes in to see us, it's the most important thing in their life, and we have to treat them like that. And in that role, sometimes I'm an advocate, sometimes I'm a mediator, sometimes I'm telling them what the law is going to be and how they're going to win. I guess that would be the magistrate. I've written legal opinions as law director in Avon Lake and as assistant law director in Lorain, and I've helped mediate all kind of issues that citizens in all those cities come in front of, and also when I was the administrative legal counsel for Holly Brinda in Elyria. That's what we do as a judges, or as a judge, but also as an attorney, is all the things that are important to the people, whether it's mediating, advocating, advising.
So if you are elected, what will you miss most about the practice of law?
I think what I'm going to miss the most is my clients. My clients are what drive me to work every day, to do the best I can for them, to be their mediator, to be their magistrate, to be their voice of reason. And I will miss helping somebody in that more private setting. But on the other hand, I'll be able to help in the judge seat too. And we'll take great pleasure in being able to do that and to help people. There are a few cases over the years where I know I've helped them beyond what you could. And it's so nice when people say thank you and you did a great job and, you know, all those kind of things. So I will miss that for sure.
And what about, is there something you'll miss the least about the practice of law?
You know, they say, and Judge Sirigliano told me this a long time ago, that the law is a jealous mistress. So I don't know. I don't see that there's anything that I'm going to miss the least in terms of my practice. I can't come up with anything to answer that one.
Okay. And lastly, is there anything else you would like to share to help voters make a decision as to why you're the most qualified candidate for this position?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that I am the most qualified candidate. I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've practiced in all the municipal courts in the area, not just as a prosecutor, not just as a defense attorney, not just as a civil litigants attorney on either side. I've not just done evictions, I've done the other side. And the court is much more complicated than anybody thinks it is. Way more complicated. And, you know, when it comes to doing the things that you need to do as a municipal court judge, I will do those. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a law director who basically supervised the prosecutor who's been there for 25 years now plus. And I supervised him for 14 years. You know, I've been in Avon Lake, a lifelong resident of Avon Lake. I've been, you know, when it comes to the Democratic primary in particular, I have been a precinct person for close to 20 years, where I went out and got voted into the seat in the 4th Ward here in Avon Lake. I've done and prepared myself for this, and I know, as I've said before, that I'm going to do a great job, and I look forward to serving the citizens of Avon, Avon Lake, and Sheffield Village as their municipal court judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Smith. Attorney Manning, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and just introduce yourself, please.
Sure, absolutely. Before I introduce myself, I'd like to thank the Lorain County Bar Association for putting together the event. I think this is great that we have the opportunity to get before the voters, and thank you for conducting the interviews. But a little bit about me. First and foremost, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. What am I missing? I'm a wife. And I have 3 beautiful children. They're ages 12, 9, and 5. And so in addition to being a family person, I'm, of course, an attorney. I've been practicing law for 18 years. I've been a magistrate with the Lorain Municipal Court for 13 of those years. I also work as the Mayor's Court magistrate at Northridgeville Mayor's Court. I work as an assistant prosecutor for the Village of Put-in-Bay, and then I have a private practice as well. So that's, I guess, a little bit about me. And then in addition to that, of course, I do lots of stuff with my kids and help them a lot, and I'm very involved in their activities. So.
And please tell us, why are you running for the position of municipal court judge at Avon Lake Municipal Court?
Well, I grew up in a family where community service has always been a big part of our family, and I think that if I were to have the opportunity to serve as the municipal court judge, I can make a really meaningful impact on our community, and I would love to have that opportunity. And I think that I have the right tool set in order to, provide that meaningful impact. So that's why I'm running.
Tell us about your involvement that you've had in the communities that are served by the court.
So I've been, very involved. What I do from on a county perspective, which of course would cover the jurisdiction of Avon, Avon Lake, and Sheffield Village, is I've served on the Lorain County Law Library Board for the past, I think it's been about 12 to 13 years, almost the entire tenure as being a magistrate. I've served previously on the Ethics and Grievance Committee for the Lorain County Bar Association. More directly in my community, as a private practicing attorney, I'm able to provide pro bono legal services to clients who aren't able to afford their own legal services. I am a member of the North Coast Chamber of Commerce, the North Ridgeville Chamber of Commerce. In addition to those things, I'm involved in the boosters and the PTA. I like to be as involved as I can with my kids and kind of take interest in the things that they take interest in. And I'm sure I'm missing some things, so I try to be as involved as I can.
What personal characteristics do you have that make you well-suited for the role of judge?
So not only do I have the years of experience in a municipal court, which I think make me uniquely qualified, as a judicial officer myself, I have worked directly on the types of cases that I would be dealing with at Avon Lake Municipal Court. Personally, I think that I'm qualified not only because of my judicial experience. I've taken court-appointed cases as a defense attorney. I serve as a part-time prosecutor as well. But then from a personality standpoint, I pride myself in being very patient, compassionate, empathetic. But in addition, I am very decisive. I really make very well thought out decisions. I research things. I listen to both sides. I think that I bring to the table the right judicial temperament.
So in this position, it's a single judge court with an appointed clerk. You will be overseeing the entire court staff and the operation of the court. What experience do you have to bring to this position that will make you the best candidate to run the court well?
So I currently run a docket that is pretty high in volume. And so I oversee the assignment commissioners. I don't directly direct clerks at the Lorain Municipal Court because they have their own clerk. But in that role, I do help make decisions about how to run the docket. So I think I'm well qualified in that way. And then in addition to that, as a private attorney, I have my own staff there as well. And so I'm qualified in that way. I already have employees under me, and I manage a budget, that I have at my own private practice. So I think that I'm qualified in those ways.
This next question is a little bit lengthy. So there are two questions in the question.
Okay.
Discuss the process you will use to facilitate possible resolution of criminal cases with the prosecutor and defense attorneys, including, will you discuss potential resolution in chambers, or will the discussions be in open court, or some other method? And would resolution of cases take place in open court always, sometimes, or not at all?
Okay, so with regards to resolution of cases, I of course think it's inappropriate to have ex parte communications. But if I have both parties present, I think that the location could be either in chambers or in the courtroom, depending on maybe the length of that conversation is going to take, or the types of topics that we're going to be covering. I do think that it's important to have certain conversations on the record, and particularly when it's a pro se litigant or pro se defendant. Of course, those are important conversations to be having, in open court. With regards to taking, I guess, you're talking about like pleas or concluding a case. When we're doing that, I think that there are times when, for court efficiency purposes, it's maybe appropriate to handle those cases not all on the record, but in most cases I think it's important to handle those cases on the record so that the defendant or the litigant fully understands the consequences of concluding the case, or maybe if it's not a conclusion of the case, completely understands what the next steps in the case are going to be, and what the expectations of the court are going to be. So I hope I hit all of those points, and if not, I'm happy to revisit anything I missed.
I believe you did. What are your thoughts with regard to diversity of staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
I think diversity in the court system in general is very important. Obviously, our community is very diverse, and so I think it's important to have that diversity reflected in the court staff, and by doing, I mean, the current staff that's there, I can't speak directly to who those individuals are, but as they start to retire, or as I have an opportunity to hire new staff, I certainly want to take diversity into consideration and make that a priority. Making sure that they're qualified employees, making sure that they're diverse, and so that they can, adequately represent our community. I also think as a judicial officer, as a female, I'd be the first female judge in Avon Lake Municipal Court. That certainly brings some diversity as well.
Do you believe it would be necessary for the staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court to complete diversity, equity, and inclusion training and/or cultural sensitivity training?
I think any opportunity to understand the implicit biases that we have and to understand how our actions can affect others is always important. And I think diversity training can be a part of that and should be a part of that.
Another multi-part question. Under what circumstances would you issue warrants for failure to appear for court hearings or failure to comply with probation orders? And do you have any thoughts or ideas as to how to reduce the number of persons who fail to appear for court? And finally, what leniency, if any, would you give for a person who fails to appear for court?
So I think this is a constant struggle in the judicial system, unfortunately. And it's something that I struggle with at Lorain Municipal Court and as a mayor's court magistrate. Certainly, I think bench warrants can be appropriate. I think that if the defendant has, knew about their needing to be in court, they've received their court date or their summons, they've been personally served that, for instance, and they then blatantly disregard that requirement to appear, I think that a bench warrant is appropriate. When we're talking about somebody who hasn't paid their fines and costs, I think that the Supreme Court has certainly made it clear that we shouldn't be treating, defendants by putting them into jail or to imprisoning them for those reasons. So I think you need to be more sensitive, particularly after the case is concluded, and the reasons and ways in which you're using these bench warrants to force compliance. I think there are other tools available when there's sometimes a license forfeiture is available, and certainly I like to try to be as clear and forthright as possible with people who are before me so that they understand that appearance is a necessity, to make sure that they understand that if they do fail to appear, a warrant may be issued for their arrest. I don't think that should be a surprise to them. They need to be fully advised of that ahead of time, in my opinion.
Now, probably the longest question we have, so
Okay.
just be patient with it. And there's a question at the beginning and a question at the end, but I think you'll understand when we get done with the question. Do you believe that judges should be able to override the state legislature or local legislative authority if the judge or the prosecutor or attorneys disagree with the law? For example, the law provides that if a person is convicted of a second offense OVI in 10 years, that person must serve a mandatory 10 consecutive days jail. The only exception is when a court makes a finding on the record that there is insufficient space in the jail. In that case, a judge may permit a person to serve 5 days jail and 18 days house arrest. Some people believe this and other laws to be too harsh. Should a judge follow the letter of the law, even if the judge and/or the attorneys disagree with the law?
My opinion is that a judicial officer's role is not to create legislation. A judicial officer's role is to follow the law. The legislature is there to create the law. the judicial officers are there to, of course, interpret and apply the law. So, for instance, in that particular instance, I think that, unless the exceptions existed, it's my opinion that the judicial officer should impose the mandatory sentence.
On November 8th, 2022, the Ohio Constitution was changed to require judges to consider public safety and a person's criminal record when setting a bond. Three-part question. How will this constitutional amendment affect the way that you make bond decisions? What procedures will you have in place to make sure you are considering public safety and a person's criminal record when setting bond? And would you consider requiring GPS and/or alcohol monitoring devices as a condition of bonds in order to ensure public safety? Yes, I'm
That's
done.
the conclusion.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay. Just
Go
wanted to
ahead.
make sure.
Yes.
So I think that bail and bond is one of the most important functions of the court. In that, there are a lot of factors that need to be considered. The law sets out all of those factors. Certainly, public safety is a factor that needs to be considered, and that is very important. The defendant's right to liberty, to not be incarcerated or punished before a conviction is also important. And on a case-by-case basis, you have to weigh those things. And it's hard to say what I would do in any particular case without having it before me, but certainly it's the judicial officer or the judge's job to weigh whether allowing the person to not be incarcerated is going to be a problem with regards to his or her safety or the safety of others, balanced in light of, certainly their right not to be incarcerated prior to a conviction. Also, you need to take into consideration whether or not that person is likely to return to court. I know that wasn't directly related to the question, but so there's so many factors that a judge needs to consider, and I think that you just have to look at the facts of the case, listen to how likely it is that this occurred, whether or not this person has a history of a violent history or violent prior convictions. We certainly want to make sure we take those things into consideration when determining whether or not that person should have a certain type of bail or bond.
The jurisdiction of the Avon Lake Municipal Court is adding more and more retail businesses. This may lead to more opportunities for theft to occur. Is there anything that you could do as judge to help deter theft in the jurisdiction?
Well, I think that diversion programs are important, and I know that Judge Bilancini has a theft diversion program. I think specialized dockets are important. I think that I'd like to look at more data and information to see who is committing those offenses and how, as a judicial officer, I may be able to prevent those. I think that if you look at maybe some of that data and you realize that there are certain individuals that have substance abuse problems, other types of insecurities, maybe housing or food insecurities, and those are the things that are leading to it, I think that in the judicial system, we can do things like implement specialized dockets in order to help prevent recidivism, in order to help people be more productive members of society, to reduce those insecurities that they may have, and hopefully then reduce the theft offenses.
The pandemic changed the way in which courts operate, including permitting remote video and telephonic appearances. What are your thoughts or ideas for incorporating the use of technology such as video appearances to conduct hearings?
I think that video and telephonic hearings are useful. I don't think they're always appropriate, but I think they can be very useful in making an efficient docket. There are certain litigants, there are certain attorneys where maybe a first pretrial or a status conference of some kind is appropriately done virtually so as not to cause any maybe it's an exaggeration, but an undue hardship on those people by having to come to court. For example, at a Lorain Municipal Court, we deal a lot with turnpike cases, and I've implemented some Zoom-type hearings and telephonic hearings to reduce the number of times that some of those individuals need to come to court. So for instance, I'll set up maybe a telephonic hearing and then a Zoom hearing for somebody who, for example, may live in Michigan or some other state where it could take them hours just to get to the courthouse. Now, I do believe that those should be used when appropriate, and it's not always appropriate. So for trials, I think it's important that all of the parties are there, unless everybody is consenting, perhaps on a civil case. I think it's important to make sure that everyone's consenting, and then I do think that it's appropriate from time to time.
How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law? And do you plan on attending any seminars or seek training, especially for areas you may be unfamiliar with before you are elected?
Absolutely. I'm always seeking out educational opportunities. I like to learn. I've always liked to learn, and I want to learn. I think it's important that when you step into a new position or a new job, that you be as educated about that job as you can, and to allow yourself, or I guess take every opportunity that you have to educate yourself and to become as knowledgeable as you can. So I would certainly seek out any sort of educational opportunities. I already go to a lot of judicial conferences as a magistrate. I've been doing that, now for 13 years, and I have to do the 40 hours, just like all of the judges, of continuing legal education. And so I would, continue to do that. Now, with regards to a case or a matter that comes before me I'm not yet familiar with, I would ask the attorneys to help educate me with certain case law they think is appropriate. I would certainly look at that. I would also do my own legal research so that I'm properly advised and informed before I make a decision.
If you are elected, would you consider seeking a judicial post at a higher level before your term is completed? And if elected, do you presently plan on seeking an additional term as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
So I don't have any plans to use this particular job as like a jumping off point. I don't have aspirations to run for a county-wide seat or an appellate seat or any other job. I've been focused on this. I'm excited to have the opportunity to be a municipal court judge. I think it's an opportunity to really interact with the community and help the community. So I don't have higher aspirations. This is my high aspiration. So I'm excited for this opportunity, and I guess I can't say for certain how many times I might run, but I would certainly fill out my first term. I plan to run for a second term, and hopefully I get that opportunity.
I think you've mentioned some of this next question and some of your other answers. What experience do you have as a mediator, arbitrator, magistrate, or similar position?
I've never been a mediator or an arbitrator, except maybe in the role of being a magistrate. But I have been a magistrate for 13 years at a Lorain Municipal Court. The judges have continued to add to my responsibilities. I think that they trust me with a lot of different types of cases. They trust me to do a good job and a thorough job. They know that I'm going to be patient and kind and understanding, and so they continue to give me additional types of cases. I've been a mayor's court magistrate now for 5.5 or so years as well, so that gives me an additional opportunity to work with people, and so those are, I guess, the ways in which I'm qualified.
If you are elected, what will you miss most about the practice of law?
So I love the people. I really do. I love sitting down with my clients and taking the time to explain to them what it is that, whatever legal issue it is that they're going through. I like the opportunity to help them, but I also like to think that I'm not giving that up completely. It's going to change when I become judge, but I'm not going to have that anymore, because I'm still going to have the opportunity to talk with people, to explain to them what it is that they're doing, the consequences of maybe whether it be their actions or a certain decision that they're making. But I'll miss my clients. I love my clients, and I'm going to miss meeting with them on a daily basis.
And how about, is there anything, let's say, you would miss least about the practice of law?
Well, my family used to joke, that being in private practice, you have all the flexibility in the world. If you want to work, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can. And I plan to take that work ethic with me to Avon Lake Municipal Court. But I think there are certain aspects of that I won't miss.
Fair enough. Is there anything else you would like to share to help voters make a decision as to why you are the most qualified candidate for this position?
I think I've expressed a lot of the ways that I am the most qualified candidate. I certainly have over a decade of experience in the municipal court, not just in any court, but in a municipal court as a magistrate, overseeing cases, managing a very heavy docket, and that certainly makes me qualified from those perspectives. But then, as I mentioned before, I bring the right temperament to the bench. I am somebody who really likes people, and I think it's important that I use that position to make sure that people understand the process, that they feel and know that they are having a fair, unbiased person on the bench overseeing their case. And I pride myself in the amount of patience that I have, in the fact that I think I'm an excellent listener. That's one of the things that I think my private practice has taught me, is to be a very good listener. And so all this talking about me makes me uncomfortable, but those are the reasons that I think that I'm the most qualified person to be an Avon Lake Municipal Court judge.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Manning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Attorney Nickel, why don't we start off by you telling us something about yourself?
Thank you. My name is Wayne Nickel. I'm running for the Avon Lake Municipal Court judge position. I was born and raised in Lorain, Ohio, and moved to Avon in 2008, where my wife and we started a family there. I've been immersed in the communities that Avon Lake Municipal Court serves since that time. In addition to living in Avon, my office is now located in Sheffield Village, which also Avon Lake Municipal Court also serves. And I also work in the Avon Lake Municipal Court as the Sheffield Village prosecutor. I'm there once a week, and my family and I belong to St. Joe's Parish in Avon Lake. In addition, we also belong to St. Mary's Parish in Avon, and my children attend PSR at St. Mary's. We're very active in both churches that we belong to, and I'm also very active in the communities. I coach the Avon baseball. I've coached there since my daughter was younger, and I also currently coach my son. I coach Avon youth football, and I also coach intramural CYO basketball. So I'm very active in the communities, again, that serve the Avon Lake Municipal Court.
Please tell us why you are running for the position as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court.
The timing just felt right. I've been a lawyer now for 19 years. I started my career as a criminal defense attorney in addition to practicing family law. I've practiced family law my entire career. And recently, since 2015, I've been a prosecutor. So I've seen both sides of the cases that come before the Avon Lake Municipal Court. In addition, I practice there presently as the prosecutor for Sheffield Village. I handle jury trials in that particular court, and I interact with members of the community that come before the court. And I believe that the timing was right to transition from public service as a prosecutor into the position as judge. I know Judge Bill Encini. I've worked with him over the last several years, and he's done a great job, and I really want to continue the example that he set in that particular court. I think I'm the best to do that.
What involvement have you had in the communities that are served by the court?
Absolutely. So as I indicated in my opening, for the city of Avon, I've coached just about every sport. I'm very active with the Avon Little League Board. I'm a member and a board member there, as well as the safety officer for the Avon Little League. I'm very active in Avon Youth Football. I've coached there for the last 3 years, working with the youth to teach them the fundamentals of sports, I think is very important. Again, my family, we belong to the churches where we're very active. I'm a lector at Avon Lake St. Joe's. And again, with CYO, I'm very active in helping however we can, mainly with coaching. In Sheffield Village, my office is located there. I'm the Sheffield Village prosecutor. I work directly with the Sheffield Village Police Department, on cases that come before the Avon Lake Municipal Court. So in all 3 communities, I think I have a very strong presence, which I think would transition well into being a judge for Avon Lake Municipal Court.
What personal characteristics do you have that make you well suited for the role as judge?
I consider myself a leader. I was the past president of the Lorain County Bar Association, and very proud of some of the things that we achieved while I was on the board. One of the things that we did was we were able to increase the court-appointed rate for court-appointed attorneys. For years, court-appointed attorneys were paid a rate which was set before I was even, probably close to when I was born. And it wasn't fair, in my opinion, for that those rates. So again, I think that was an achievement that I felt very proud of, and that happened while I was president of the Bar Association. I believe I'm fair. Having a background as a criminal defense attorney, I use that now as a prosecutor. When attorneys come to me and they have a legal issue, I give them a fair shake. I just don't take one position that I'm a prosecutor and this is, I listen to their arguments. And sometimes we have healthy debates. If I disagree with them, then I respect their position as a criminal defense attorney because I was in their shoes. And sometimes we have to have trials and let the judge decide. But I'm willing to listen to arguments and be fair for purposes of being a judge.
Avon Lake Municipal Court is a single-judge court where the clerk is appointed by the judge. And so you will oversee the entire court staff and the operation of the court. What experience do you bring to this position that will make you the best candidate to run the court well?
Great question. I've been on my own in private practice since 2016. Prior to that, I was law partners with Anthony Giardini and Chris Cook. We started a law firm in 2008. My position unofficially with that law firm was it wasn't a named managing partner, but I operated the day-to-day. I dealt with the employees. I dealt with health insurance issues. I dealt with ordering supplies, things that my older law partners probably didn't really have the time for, and figured I had the time to do it, and I was happy to do it, and it gave me a great experience in running a law firm. And that transition now into I'm a solo practitioner, but I'm responsible for my employees. I have 2 employees right now. One employee who's been with me since 2008. She's very helpful, but again, I'm overseeing everyone. So I have that background of running a business that I think will transition well into running the Avon Lake Municipal Court, as the single judge court.
Next question is a multi-part question, but it's all one question. You'll see what I am talking about when I read this to you. Discuss the process you will use to facilitate possible resolution of criminal cases with the prosecutor and defense attorneys, including, will you discuss potential resolution in chambers, or will the discussions be in open court or some other method? And Would resolution of cases take place in open court always, sometimes, or not at all?
So the first question, the process, I think now, again, in the court now, the way that we handle, at least the way that I handle my cases with defense attorneys, is I have a general pretty good idea of what Judge Bilancini is going to do based upon my experience with him on certain cases in terms of punishment, and if someone is going to enter into a plea. So I share that with the criminal defense attorney. I say, look, this is my experience. I believe this is what's going to happen, but if you want to speak to the judge to get certainty, I'm happy to do that, as long as we're both there and it's on the up and up and we're talking to the judge about and giving him all the relevant facts. So I think that method has proven to be pretty effective in resolving cases, because I think as a defense attorney and a criminal defendant, before you enter into a plea, you should have some semblance of, is this a knowing, intelligent, voluntary plea, so that I can have some expectation of how it's going to affect my life. So I think that method is pretty effective, and that is the method that I would encourage the lawyers that come before me to use. Now, I can't speak for the Avon or Avon Lake prosecutor presently, but that's how I handle it now, and it's been pretty effective. And the second part of the question, I'm sorry, Judge.
As far as where will the discussions and resolution of the cases take place? Will they just take place in chambers or in open court? How would you handle that?
Well, I think there's, if a party is represented by a lawyer, I would be comfortable with speaking to the defense attorney and the prosecutor in chambers. If the party's pro se, I'd probably be a little more comfortable going off the record in the courtroom, and then putting on the record something that relates to what our discussions were, so that everyone is on the same page. I think transparency is important, and I believe that would be the appropriate way to handle that particular case.
Thank you. What are your thoughts with regard to diversity of staff at the court?
I think it's appropriate. I think diversity of staff is something that needs to be considered. That's a tough question, but I think it's important to have a diverse group of people who are representing the staff, who also represent the communities that we are serving, Avon Lake, and Sheffield Village. So I think it would be important to, have that diversity on the staff, so that all people are represented in the court.
Do you believe it is necessary or would be necessary for the staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court to complete diversity, equity, and inclusion training and/or cultural sensitivity training?
I think that would be important, because the people that come before the court are from all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds. You have the poorest of the poor, and you have very wealthy people who are coming before the court. And all races and ethnicities also are before the court. So I think that would be important that the staff members are aware and have that appropriate training to interact with members of the public.
Another multi-part question. Under what circumstances would you issue warrants for failure to appear for court hearings or failure to comply with probation orders? And do you have any thoughts or ideas as to how you would reduce the number of persons who fail to appear in court? And finally, what leniency, if any, would you give for a person who fails to appear for court?
Well, we deal with that now. There's times when people don't appear, and the way that I handle it is I just simply let the clerk know that the person did not appear, and if it's a multiple, I usually keep track. I have a couple defense attorneys that come before me, not before me, excuse me, but interact with me pretty frequently, and I'll tell them if their client doesn't appear the first time, I'll note that, and I tell them I'm going to write that down, because if they don't appear next time, I'm going to ask the court to issue a warrant. So I think it's important. Coming to court is not a suggestion. I think it's very important to take that seriously. And if someone's not going to show up to court frequently, I understand things happen. And with COVID, we had a lot of people missing court a great deal. So I guess I'm open to listening to why the person missed, and if they have a legitimate excuse. But if it's a constant thing, it's something that has to be addressed. And that was the second part of that.
That answers the question.
Okay.
Thank you. This is the longest question you'll have.
Okay.
It has two questions, one at the beginning, one at the end, but it is one question. You will understand after I read the question.
Okay.
Do you believe that judges should be able to override the state legislature or local legislative authority if the judge or the prosecutor or attorneys disagree with the law? For example, the law provides that if a person is convicted of a second offense, OVI, in 10 years, that person must serve a mandatory 10 consecutive days jail. The only exception is when a court makes a finding on the record that there is insufficient space in the jail. In that case, a judge may permit a person to serve 5 days jail and 18 days house arrest. Some people believe this and other laws to be too harsh. Should a judge follow the letter of the law, even if the judge and or the attorneys disagree with the law?
Well, if the judge disagrees with the law, I believe he shouldn't legislate from the bench. It's not the judge's position to override the legislature. If the legislature provides for some method of punishment, the judge should follow the law.
On November 8th, 2022, the Ohio Constitution was changed to require judges to consider public safety and a person's criminal record when setting a bond. Three-part question. You don't have to answer all three, but answer one or more. How will this constitutional amendment affect the way you make bond decisions? B, what procedures will you have in place to make sure that you are considering public safety and a person's criminal record when setting bond? And C, would you consider requiring GPS and or alcohol monitoring devices as a condition of bond in order to ensure public safety?
Again, I handle this on a weekly basis. I prosecute in Vermilion as well as in Sheffield Village, and bond is a topic that comes up all the time with serious crimes and crimes in general. And oftentimes the judge will ask my opinion and my position on the state's recommendation for a bond in the matter. So I have the experience in this, and generally I want to know the person's background. Have they have a history of criminal offenses? Do they have a history of not showing up to court? Which you can tell to an extent from looking at a criminal history. So I use those tools now as a prosecutor to make my recommendations to the judge. And if I become judge, I would continue to do that. I would rely upon the state to an extent to provide me with some information regarding the defendant's background and history in determining whether or not to issue or what bond to set and what bond would be appropriate. As far as GPS and alcohol devices, I recommend those now to the judge. Again, if the circumstances are appropriate. If it's a person's third offense OVI, I typically recommend that the judge allow him to, or order him or her to have an alcohol monitoring device on them based upon their history. If it's a third offense OVI, and I have information that those two prior offenses were marijuana, and they involved marijuana, not alcohol, I might not recommend a alcohol monitoring device because that person doesn't have a history of alcohol-related offenses. So I think every case is different, every defendant is different, and I think the more information you have about not only the defendant but the particular offense, those methods are appropriate.
The jurisdiction of the Avon Lake Municipal Court is adding more and more retail businesses. This leads to more opportunities for theft. Is there anything you could do as a judge to help deter theft in the jurisdiction?
I don't know about deter theft, and I agree with that. I've seen since my time as in Sheffield Village that it seems like there's more and more thefts. as the village adds more retail places of business. I know it's a huge problem in Avon because Avon has a tremendous amount of businesses. But is there anything that I can do to deter that as a judge? I really can't answer that in terms of deterrence. But in terms of, theft cases in general, again, I think every case is different. If someone is stealing, the old adage, a loaf of bread to feed their family, I think that's a little different than someone that is going into Walmart and just taking a bunch of things, retail items, for no other reason other than just to steal. So, I know there's a potential for theft diversion for first offenders. I'd like to utilize that. We use that now, but I'd like to continue utilizing that if I become judge for people who are first offenders and, the circumstances warrant it.
The pandemic changed the way in which courts operate, including permitting remote video and telephonic appearances for participants. What are your thoughts or ideas for incorporating the use of technology, such as video appearances, to conduct hearings?
I like it to an extent. It's difficult, and I'll give you an example. When the pandemic was kind of slowing down a little bit, although it depends who you ask and whether or not it's slowed down or not, but we had a hybrid situation kind of going on in Vermilion, where we would allow defendants to appear via Zoom, and then other defendants had to come in. So the challenge for me as prosecutor was juggling people who were coming in and then people in the waiting room. So I think if you can find that balance and allow participation by Zoom, as long as there's some way to verify that it's the person, that it is that person, I'm talking, of course, of pro se defendants, then I think it would be a good tool to use going forward. We use it all the time in domestic relations, and it works out very effectively because you're able to manage your docket a little bit better. But I think with criminal cases, mainly criminal cases, it's difficult to juggle when you have preliminary hearings going on and motions to suppress hearings, and then you have a bunch of people waiting on Zoom. So if I can find that balance, then I think I would definitely utilize it.
How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law? And do you plan on attending any seminars or seek training, especially for areas that you may be unfamiliar with, before you are elected?
So this would probably apply to more of the civil aspect, although I've done civil litigation for 19 years as a domestic relations attorney. Different kind of animal I get, but when I was in my private practice with my law partners, with Chris Cook and Tony Giardini, we did a lot of civil litigation. So at that time, I do have a background. So in terms of being unfamiliar with those areas of the law, absolutely. I think training and CLEs are very important to familiarize yourself with those areas that you're unfamiliar with. In terms of criminal law, you can always do better. You can always educate yourself. You never have all the answers, and I would never expect to have all the answers. I like when a defense attorney comes into my office now, points something out to me, and we look it up. I look it up just to make sure he's right, he or she is right, and we find the answer together, and I like doing things like that. So I'll never have all the answers as a judge in criminal or civil litigation. I'll always want to educate myself and to the best of my ability.
If you are elected, would you consider seeking a judicial post at a higher level before your term is completed? And if elected, do you presently plan on seeking an additional term as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
I do not plan to seek a higher position, although I can't say, you never know what's going to happen. You can't predict the future. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have told you that I was going to run for Avon Lake Municipal Court. But what was the second question, Judge? I'm sorry.
If you are elected, do you presently plan on seeking an additional term as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
I do. I'm 43 years old. I'm relatively young. I would plan, if the citizens of Avon, Avon Lake, and Sheffield Village put their trust in me and voted me in for a first term, I would certainly seek a second term and continue As long as I'm doing a good job and I'm getting positive feedback, I would absolutely seek a second term and a third term.
What experience do you have as a mediator, arbitrator, magistrate, or similar position?
I don't have any experience as a judicial officer, mediator, arbitrator. I don't have any certifications, but I will tell you that doing divorce work for 19 years, there's an aspect of mediation that you have, whether it's doing a dissolution where you are representing just one party and the other party is unrepresented, whether it's doing a dissolution where both parties are represented. I always tell clients the story that you can do a dissolution. It might not last. Usually it doesn't last as long. I had one that lasted for a year where we negotiated for a year back and forth. Both parties had lawyers. Very contentious issues, but we were able to finalize it and resolve it. And then as a divorce attorney in litigation, it's not just going to trial. You are constantly negotiating and going back and forth in terms of mediating differences. So I don't have the title mediator or arbitrator, but I certainly have the experience in dealing with personalities all across the board in reaching resolutions, in solving matters for people.
If elected, what will you miss most about the practice of law?
I like being my own boss. I've been on my own totally since 2017, the beginning of 2017. And there's something cool about being your own boss and doing what you want to do and working as hard as you want to work and taking off, time whenever you want to take off time. There's a positive to that. So I will certainly miss that flexibility. I understand as a judge, your boss, so to speak, are the citizens, and you have to go to work every single day. Not that I don't work every day now, but you have to keep that in mind and not be able to have really that flexibility that you do as a small business owner.
And on the other hand, what will you miss least about the practice of law?
Well, I'm a pretty hard worker. And I work Saturdays, Sundays, evenings, early in the morning. I'm always on my phone, emailing, texting clients because domestic relations clients are, I don't want to use the word high maintenance, but they need a lot of attention. So I won't miss that part of private practice. I like having a more consistent routine, not being disrupted as much with certain things that came up. I'll give you an example. Today, I had a list of things I wanted to accomplish. I said, it's Monday, I'm going to attack it. Here's what I'm going to do. And 4 different things came up that derailed that. So I understand that might come up in as being judge, but I won't miss that, that sort of hustle and bustle of private practice.
Lastly, is there anything else you would like to share to help voters make a decision as to why you are the most qualified candidate?
Again, I think I said it early on, but I'll just reiterate. I'm in the Avon Lake Municipal Court now. I think I'm the only candidate that practices there on the frequency that I practice in. And I think that's important. I've interacted as a prosecutor with members of the community who are victims of crime. I've interacted with police officers, both Sheffield Village and Avon Lake, when I occasionally will fill in for an arraignment or something that needs my attention. So I think that experience and doing that with members of the community, I think sets me apart from all the other candidates. And I'm going to utilize those experiences and transition into being the judge of Avon Lake Municipal Court.
Thank you, Attorney Nickel.
Thank you very much, Judge.
You're welcome. Okay, so Attorney Coaches, let me start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Paul Coaches. I am a resident of Lorain County. I live in Avon. I've been there since 2001. I've been practicing law since 1999. I've been a magistrate with the Lorain County Common Pleas Court, Juvenile Domestic Relations Division since 2013, practicing in that area of law. I have a wife, 4 boys. We've been here as part of the community for several years, doing various activities, attending church, All my boys played soccer, so I've been soccer coach, soccer referee, and that's a brief bit of who I am.
Thank you. Please tell us, why are you running for the position of Judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
I am running for Judge of Avon Lake Municipal Court because I'd like to see some change and progress within our judicial system. I think that we've taken it to the point that we no longer realize how estranged the public is from the judicial system. I think we need to do a better job of educating and providing information to the public, and I believe that I have a plan to do so in regards to placing information on the court's website, so that way when they come to court, they are not surprised by the process, they're not uneducated as to the process, and that people have a better experience when they enter the court.
What involvement have you had in the communities that are served by the court?
Involvement within the communities. As I said, my boys are sports players, so I've been somehow involved with the Avon soccer community for the past 20 years. I've been a coach for various teams on various levels, both recreational and travel. I have one son left who's on club and travel still. And I also am a certified referee for the soccer, so that way I can step in and soccer officiate, because we're so low on referees for all sports, baseball, football, soccer, lacrosse. So I have those. I have worked in the concession stand at the Avon football games. My sons are also orchestra players. So the Avon Band and Orchestra boosters run the concession stand at the game, so I've been a volunteer in the concession stands. I attend Hope Christian Church. I've also done Little League. My boys played baseball for a few years as well on top of soccer. So I've also coached some baseball. And I also do other community activities. I am a member of the Avon VFW Post 735, where I am the junior vice commander of that post. I am also a member of American Legion here in Avon Lake, Post 211, where I'm the adjutant of that post. So I do quite a lot. I haven't really gotten much into Sheffield Village other than to participate in some events there, but there's no community activities that I'm necessarily involved in currently in Sheffield Lake, other than attending some Metro Park presentations there at the French Creek Nature Center.
What personal characteristics do you have that make you well suited for the role as judge?
I believe the characteristics I have that make me well suited for judge is that I am determined. I believe in making sure that people get the fair hearing. Again, I'm currently a magistrate, and I've been doing it for 10 years, where I sit there and I make sure everybody gets their voices heard. So I have the patience to listen to everybody's story, to make sure that I'm impartial in those renditions of when I go through, and that people feel that they have been fully heard and that they have received a just decision.
Now, the Avon Lake Municipal Court is a single judge court, and the judge appoints the clerk. So you will oversee the entire court staff and the operation of the court. What experience do you bring to this position that will make you the best candidate to run the court?
My military experience. I've been in the military for coming on 25 years, almost 26 come August. I've been deployed twice, and I've run a legal shop. I've had several attorneys under me as well as paralegals. When we were deployed to Iraq, I was the brigade judge advocate. As the trial counsel, I had one lawyer above me, myself. We had to work with several lawyers throughout Iraq. We had 6 paralegals under us, and we had thousands of soldiers that we had to deal with their legal issues, so we traveled around. But the managing of the legal office fell on myself. Again, when I went to Kosovo, I was the brigade judge advocate over the entire system for the American justice at that point, where I had 2 attorneys and 5 paralegals, I believe, that we had to run. Again, the system, there was a lot less soldiers there at that time in Kosovo, where we only had a few hundred. But being that I have to organize, we're doing military justice, we're doing claims, we're doing negotiations between the different militaries. As far as self-help, we have to do negotiations with the various governments as well. So between my experience of running a legal shop of a large law office during my deployments, my experience as a magistrate, seeing how the court system already works and dealing with the clerk's office, understanding the process. Right now the juvenile court is upgrading their system, so we're going completely paperless. I believe that's part of getting there, getting the knowledge of the position, and making sure that we all are working together and progressing forward.
Thank you. This question is a multi-part question, so just listen to the whole question, and
Okay.
I know you'll understand after I get done with the question. Discuss the process you will use to facilitate possible resolution of criminal cases with the prosecutor and defense attorneys, including, will you discuss potential resolution in chambers, or will the discussions be in open court or some other method? And would resolution of cases take place in open court always, sometimes, or not at all?
That is going to come down to talking with the community, talking with the mayors of those cities, talking with the prosecutor's office, talking with the defense bar. I believe the system needs to have that input, and I as a judge should not be setting the dictates as to how the entire court system should be running. I definitely want to listen to the employees as to how they feel the system should be worked with the clerk's office, what their management system is going to need to be. I know several attorneys, especially when you're dealing with low-level crimes, jaywalking, disorderly conduct, minor misdemeanors. Do those need to be put on the record, or are those issues that can be done? I mean, traffic offenses can be done by waiver. So for those people who want to show up and contest a traffic ticket, they want their day in court, and that needs to be on the record. For those who show up and want to waive their hearings, I believe that the public should be allowed to have those waiver of hearings. If attorneys believe that it would be best suited for the community to have discussion in chambers, then I am fully prepared to do discussions in chambers as I do now with some counsel, as well as on the record with all parties present at the table. I think that there is definitely a need to make sure that everybody is getting what they want out of the system, and having one rule of thumb as to how to handle every case is not the appropriate way. One size fits all justice doesn't really fit. We have to really look at what the community standards are and what the public expects, given the different crimes. So I'd be open to doing what the case, the attorneys, and the litigants wish to do in regards to their handling of their matters in the municipal court.
What are your thoughts with regard to diversity of staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
Diversity is always an important topic, no matter where you're at, be it the court system, be it just in public, being in a soccer team. You have to have that full variety of opinions in regards to those issues. The military, colleges, businesses, they all recruit on diversity basis because everybody comes from a different walk of life and we see things differently. So to not have diversity in the system probably again goes back to not having a full community justice in regards to that, because some points of view are not being fully represented, at least heard at the table where they should be.
Do you believe it would be necessary for the staff at the Avon Lake Municipal Court to complete diversity, equity, and inclusion training and/or cultural sensitivity training?
I would have to find out what their current training is in regards to those. If there are issues with that within the court system, then you obviously need to have a discussion on that and training on that. If there is no issues in regards to those matters, then I know with the court system, both with our court system at the Common Pleas Court and in the military, we have annual requirements to do that. I can't believe that the municipal court also will not have those same annual requirements. And if they don't, then that would definitely be something that I'd like to look into about instituting that. That way all court systems throughout the county is receiving the same state training that is required at that higher level.
The multi-part question, but it's shouldn't be complicated. Under what circumstances would you issue warrants for failure to appear for court hearings or failure to comply with probation orders? And Do you have any thoughts or ideas how to reduce the number of persons who fail to appear for court? And finally, what leniency, if any, would you give for a person who fails to appear for court?
Okay. Hopefully I can remember each of those parts.
Well, do you want me to review it a little bit, or maybe formulate the question a little bit better?
Okay.
The question here is, many people don't appear
Correct.
for court. You probably know that if you're in the system right now.
Absolutely.
So how would you decide when to issue warrants for people, and what are your thoughts as far as trying to reduce the number of people that don't appear for court?
In regards to failure to appear, failure to, I believe probation was also one of them, complete probationary requirements. Notice is the big thing. I mean, going through and seeing what those impediments are. Currently, when I have litigants who aren't showing up in court, for civil cases, there's not much you're going to do. So on the criminal side, you give them notice. If they don't appear, maybe it's a matter of they didn't get their mail, they missed the date, you send out a second notice. If that doesn't work, I believe at that point we would send out a summons, basically something a little bit more official. There are bailiffs within the court. I'm sure the various police departments would be fine dropping off a letter, knocking on a door, almost with a welfare check saying, hey, you've been missed court. I'm not here to arrest you. There's no warrant. We just want to make sure you're getting the notification of this. Fourth, fifth time of missing court without notification. At that point, I believe it's looking at what level of crime are we talking about. Is it something that needs to be taken? That's talking with the community prosecutor as to how they believe that should be handled in regards to what they believe their community is looking for in regards to those matters. As far as failure to probation, again, I believe the deputy bailiff should go out, a probation officer, if there's a probation officer, which I would believe should be, have a probation officer in the court, go out, again, check on them. Is there a problem? Transportation's a problem. Can we do a video conference? Currently, we use Zoom in the court system. Is it something that could be done by a phone conference if they don't have that technology? They have to go to work. Can we make it easier for the litigants? Can we do an evening court? Nothing says the court needs to close at 4 o'clock every day. We could do 8 o'clock hearings if necessary. People don't stop working at 4 or 5. If that happened, we'd have no restaurants, the grocery stores. It's just a little bit insane, I think, that the court system closes so early, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. We just need to make better hours, and if that might help get people to court, that's going to be a benefit to the community.
Okay. This is the longest question we'll ask you. It's a question at the beginning and a question at the end, but if you wait until the end, you'll understand why the question is so long. Do you believe that judges should be able to override the state legislature or local legislative authority if the judge or the prosecutor or attorneys disagree with the law? For example, the law provides that if a person is convicted of a second offense, OVI, in 10 years, that person must serve a mandatory 10 consecutive days jail. The only exception is when a court makes a finding on the record that there is insufficient space in the jail. In that case, a judge may permit a person to serve 5 days jail and 18 days house arrest. Some people believe this and other laws to be too harsh. Should a judge follow the letter of the law even if the judge and or attorneys disagree with the law?
I don't believe you can ever solely follow just the letter of the law. The law was written with background. There's always legislative history. What are we trying to accomplish with the law? What is the spirit of the law? When you take any principle, you need to sit there and look at the whole picture, not just what's written down. Litigation tells us what those words mean, sometimes in great detail, whether it's permissive or mandatory. Do I believe that we need to follow the law? Absolutely, we need to follow the law. Otherwise, you'd have a chaotic society. We would have a lack of coherent justice in our system. Because if everything was willy-nilly at the issue of what the judge's mood was like that day or what the judge's personal belief was at that time, you're going to lose faith in the judicial system. The judge has to follow the law, but there should be exceptions to it. And if the judge believes wholeheartedly it's unconstitutional, lawyers have the ability to challenge the law and file their objections and say, look, we believe this is unconstitutional, do their briefings, have that matter put before the judge, and have the judge make a ruling, which can obviously go up on the higher levels to determine if those are the appropriate punishments. And there's always not judicial action, but legislative action. If the Bar Association, through the attorneys, the judges, through the Judicial Officers Associations, believe that these laws are too much, we can suggest to the legislative branch to make modifications to these laws if they are not what they need to be, if they are not promoting the aspects of justice, if they are not serving the needs of the community. So for an OVI, we really want treatment over issues, not punishment. Are we really making the community safer by locking people up? Probably not. Is it harsh? Yes. Is it necessary? Sometimes, absolutely. But we can't just go along with our feelings in regards to how everything's going to be. So yes, I believe that the judge has to follow both the letter and the spirit of the law. And if the judge feels that something is off with the law, that they need to do what they can to have some type of modification to the law rather than just ignore it.
On November 8th, 2022, the Ohio Constitution was changed to require judges to consider public safety and a person's criminal record when setting a bond. 3 questions. How will this constitutional amendment affect the way you make bond decisions? Secondly, what procedures will you have in place to make sure that you are considering public safety and a person's criminal record when setting bond? And thirdly, would you consider requiring GPS and/or alcohol monitoring devices as a condition of bond in order to ensure public safety?
Okay. In regards to the updated legislation, I believe it was somewhat symbolic. I believe a judge should have always been taking in public safety, even if it's not explicitly listed on your list of things that you have to consider. I believe typically any law will always say, and any other factors that a judge considers to be appropriate in considering the amount of bond. So you have to look at the public safety issue. You have to look at their prior records. You have to look at their economic standing. Can they afford this? Is it unjust? What the level of the crime is that they're accused of at this time. There's lots of factors that go to it, so I don't believe that passing of that amendment made a judge's job any more difficult than what it already was in setting a bond appropriately. I just said that you have to consider these additional factors, which I believe most judges are already looking at, even though they weren't mandatorily required to. In regards to the second part of the question, I missed that one.
Yeah.
The second part was,
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What would you consider requiring GPS and/or alcohol monitoring devices as a condition of the bond?
I thought that was the third piece. Was there a
It
second
is.
piece in there?
I'm sorry.
I'm
What
sorry.
procedures will you have in place to make sure that you are considering public safety and a person's criminal record when setting bond?
Review of the record. Obviously, you're going to make sure the prosecutor places that in regards to those issues as far as the criminal history when they're talking about what their bond should be, talking with the prosecutors of the cities as to what their community's public safety is. That's something that is really falling on the prosecutors' matter to make sure they're presenting that to the court. The court can't go out and do their own investigation. They can't go out and do all these background checks in regards to those issues. I can look up their criminal history, yes. But do I know the circumstances of that? What is the part and parcel? And the defense counsel is going to bring those issues up. If they're truly representing their client, they're going to say, look, this is public safety issue. If it's really a violation of public safety, they're not going to make much issue about that, and they'll focus on the other matters. So I believe making sure that the prosecutor and the defense lawyer are both clearly indicative of what is expected for them to cover in their bond appeals in regards to those issues will assist the court in making sure that those are being presented fully and fairly in the full light, and that it's coming from the public and not from the judge going around and doing their own matters in regards to those issues. Yes, the court has to make sure the information they're receiving is accurate, especially for that, but I believe that the prosecutor and the defense counsel really need to do it. As to the third part of the question for the GPS and the alcohol monitoring, if it's deemed appropriate and necessary, if there is no alcohol-related offense, I don't see where there would be a need for an alcohol monitor. If that's not part of the part and parcel, if it's an OVI offense, okay, how far up is it? Is it mandated by law? Is it because they are getting into fisticuffs at the bar frequently? Every weekend they go to the bar, they get intoxicated, they get into a fight. Do we need to do it? GPS monitoring, if there's a flight risk issue, then I could see it, but I don't see much of a flight risk issue. The municipal court handles lower level misdemeanor crimes. They're not large felonies where people are going away for years and years. If there was some reason to have a GPS monitoring, if there was a felony bindover that needed to do that because there were higher level felonies, I could see potentially looking at a GPS. But at this point, I can't think of a misdemeanor crime that would truly need to have such high level and expensive, because that would be put on the cost of the defendant typically, to make them pay for that monitoring, when I think there's better alternatives that probably could be put in place.
Thank you. The jurisdiction of the court is adding more and more retail businesses. This leads to more opportunities for theft. Is there anything you could do as judge to help deter theft in the jurisdiction?
Within the bounds of what the judicial canons would allow, I believe that there could be. Obviously attending public forums, not necessarily as the judge, but as just a person to stop and listen. The mayors of the city can obviously hold business forums. I think it would be appropriate for the court or a judicial representative or a probation officer, somebody to appear at those forums just to listen, to find out what the community's issues are. You need to be able to work with the business community without violating your judicial ethics. So there would be some difficulties with it, but with the retail crime, obviously it's a big expense, especially for some of the smaller businesses, the small startup businesses. We might think petty theft, you know, it's only a $150 bottle of alcohol that they stole, or a picture off of a wall that was this amount of money, arts and crafts, I mean, clothing out of the store. But Target can absorb losses a little bit better than I think the small mom and pop stores can do. So what are we doing to make sure if there is theft that restitution is being taken care of? So I believe working with the business community is something that we could do to help address those issues, but there's only so much I believe that the judicial can do to stop and prevent a series of crimes from occurring.
The pandemic changed the way in which courts operate, including permitting remote video and telephonic appearances for participants. What are your thoughts or ideas for incorporating the use of technology such as video appearances to conduct hearings?
I'm fully supportive of video appearances. I use them as much as possible currently in my current magistrate role. Pre-trials, review hearings, statuses. If I'm not taking testimony, that's a little trickier. You have communication failure, the internet might go down, they might be in a bad reception area. So I do prefer that my trials be in person at all possible. But taking a day off of court to come to court for a 15-minute hearing just to get another court date, I think people's time is better spent staying at work and just taking a 15-minute break to appear by video. And I definitely think that would be very appropriate to take care of that, and trying to keep the litigants out of court as much as possible, and trying to make it as easy as possible for the attorneys to do the appearance without having to run up their clients' bills by traveling back and forth to the court all the time.
How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law? Would you plan on attending any seminars or seek training, especially for areas you may be unfamiliar with before you may be elected?
Absolutely. There's always the CLE requirements of the judicial officers. As you go through it, taking more and more CLEs is always appropriate, and you never know what is going to touch on your court. I currently do a lot of children's services cases, so making sure I'm up to date on drug laws needs to be maintained, especially with the medical marijuana cards and the various forms of the marijuana legislation that people keep proposing. I definitely think you have to. You have to take the seminars, talking with fellow judges, doing what you can to make sure that you are being consistent and as well-rounded as possible. In regards to all that, that comes before the court, and never expect that something's not going to come in front of you just because it hasn't yet.
If elected, would you consider seeking a judicial post at a higher level before your term is completed? And if elected, do you presently plan on seeking an additional term as judge of the Avon Lake Municipal Court?
If elected, I definitely am going to serve out my term, especially the first term. You should not be looking, in my mind, at higher office when you're just getting into office. So would I serve out a initial first year, 6-year term? Absolutely. Would I go for a second term? Absolutely. Would I be going for additional terms after that? Or would I be seeking a higher office? Possibly. I would like to maybe return to the Common Pleas Court down the road. It just depends upon if the timing is right, what the situation would be, what judgeship I would be looking at. That would be something, but that would not be something I would consider until into my second term when I got there. But I'm also a proponent of term limits, so I don't see myself serving more than 2 terms at the Avon Lake Municipal Court judge before stepping away.
I think you may have answered this next question in part. What experience do you have as a mediator, arbitrator, magistrate, or similar position?
Well, to go all the way back, during law school, I was a law clerk for the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court, and I was a trained mediator with the custody program with that court, where I'd sit down and mediate custody disputes between litigants, trying to work that out. As I was there, we also started doing children's service mediations, trying to work out to empower the parents to have better results and greater balance of power with them between the state of Ohio through the Children's Services Agency. So I was a certified mediator there right during law school. That certification is probably more lapsed now. But then after law school, I went into the domestic relations. And domestic relations is all about negotiation, mediation, trying to handle expectations, and making sure people have all the options that are available to them. A lot of people make decisions too rashly because they don't have enough information. So going into the mediations, going into those negotiations, making sure that everybody knows what cards are in play definitely helps out. So if there's a way to do mediation, negotiation, I am all for those subjects. And then as a magistrate, we have to talk in regards to those matters. Parties come in, they have recommendations with Children's Services. You have the different areas. The agency has their requirements for parents to meet. The parents may or may not disagree with them. So it's a matter of, okay, can you do this instead of this? You have, the agency wants anger management. You're saying that you don't have anger issues, it's a disciplinary issue with your children. So maybe you should take parenting classes instead. So can we negotiate this out? Instead of an anger management, maybe we should take a parental disciplinary matter. So I believe I use negotiation since I was a law student, trying to work out these resolutions for the parties before the court.
Now, you were a full-time magistrate.
I am a full-time
Yes,
magistrate
so the
now.
next 2 questions probably don't apply, but I'm going to ask them only because we ask them of everyone, and I don't want to miss a question.
Understood.
If elected, what will you miss most about the practice of law? That would be the next question. The following question, what would you miss least about the practice of law? So if you don't think they apply, you don't have to answer those, or you may, I guess, answer what you would miss about your present position, or not.
Well, when I took the magistrate position 10 years ago, it's the trade-off. Working in the court system, it is a 40-hour-a-week job. There are some on-call hours that I am on for the court where we get after-hour calls for different orders. But it is a solid paycheck. There's no question every 2 weeks. You're not chasing down the money. A lot of attorneys will tell you that that's one of the least favorable parts of practice. However, when you are in practice and you really help out a client and you get them an outcome that's even better than they expected, the ability to represent those parties and get them what they wanted out of the judicial system, educating them in the system and letting them understand the process and be involved in the government on a positive basis I do miss that, even 10 years after getting out. You can help people, but as a judge, you don't get the full story all the time, especially when certain things happen. So it's nice to have what I think is a more complete picture as an attorney than what the judges sometimes always get. So I do miss that. My current position, I would miss some of the opportunities that are there. It's a wider ranging court, a more diverse docket, because I have the children's services that I do primary, but I'm also touching on the divorce and dissolution, the custody issues, juvenile delinquency, traffic issues that I do with those. So going to the court for Avon Lake Municipal Court, it will have its own challenges, and it will be nice to get back into evictions that I used to do as a private attorney and try to go from there. So there are some trade-offs that go, but there's also the advantages of moving.
Thank you. Finally, is there anything else you would like to share to help voters make a decision as to why you are the most qualified candidate for this position?
I believe I'm the most qualified candidate due to my diversity of experience. I believe I'm the only candidate with military experience. I've been deployed. I've had to do all the different aspects of what an attorney needs to do. I'm currently a magistrate. I was a prosecutor for the military as trial counsel when I was in Iraq, dealing with disciplinary issues. I work with commanders, not only on deployment, but currently in my current position as a brigade judge advocate, dealing with the disciplinary issues, working with the court systems for soldiers who get in trouble in the civilian side and the repercussions on the military side. I have been defense counsel. When I was in the National Guard here in Ohio, they have their own separate public defenders called Trial Defense Service. I worked as a captain for 2 years, and then after a break in that, I came back as a major, and I ran the department and had 4 lawyers and a paralegal that did the trial defense of the soldiers throughout the state of Ohio. So I've been on the public defender side. As an attorney in private practice, I represented indigent clients in the Avon Lake Municipal Court, in the Lorain Municipal Court, in the Court of Common Pleas, the juvenile section, a couple up in the felony levels. So I have that wide-ranging experience. I also understand, I think, on a greater degree of how all that plays into it. You sit there and we'll talk about things, and the use of pepper spray by officers. People don't go back and realize that, but some of those laws are based upon treaties we have with other nations. So chemical irritants are part in the use of force by police officers do have an international law requirement by our government on the federal level that's pushed upon the states through the constitutional amendment to say you've got to follow these rules. So my understanding of how all that interplays, I believe, makes me the best candidate. My experience for the last 10 years as a magistrate, I've been prepared for the bench. I'm doing it. I'm understanding the rules of evidence, making sure that there's fair play, that there's impartiality that is occurring in those matters. And I understand the importance that this has on people's lives. I'm sure my other fellow candidates also understand the importance, but I also have been a litigant as much as I've been a judicial officer and attorney. I have my own cases that have been in front of the court on the family law side, so I understand the frustration with the system, and I think that gives me a different perspective as well, knowing those frustrations when I was a young lawyer going through the system as a litigant and trying to have difficulties of understanding of why this is going differently than what all the textbooks said in law school. So I think I have the greatest experience of breadth that makes me the best candidate for the position Avon Lake Municipal Court Judge.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Coaches.
Thank you, Judge Nuzzi.
You're welcome.